What is going on, YouTube? Chris with Jerno's Comics and Pop Culture. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about value of comic books. Most importantly, around if your comic books are indeed guaranteed to invest in value. And before I dive deep into the roots of this topic, I'm going to say straight up that no, nothing that you collect, nothing that you own, no comic book is guaranteed to do anything when it comes to the value. Now, of course, that's a very point blank statement, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and we need to look at a lot of different layers in terms of what makes comic books valuable in the first place. Okay, but let me break this down in the sense of like this: anything that we look to invest in, there is never a guarantee. There's always a risk. I mean, even with like when you talk about financial markets, even bonds and treasuries have a small risk. For example, if the stock market crash and the banks pull out, you can lose your money. So even money that's sitting in a savings account right now isn't guaranteed to be there tomorrow. Now there is insurance in this day and age, so take that as it is. But I'm trying to make a point here, a big, broader point to where nothing is guaranteed, right? We see that in the stock market. We see that with I mean, we could go to even collectibles like Beanie Babies. I mean, people invested in Beanie Babies as if it was the hottest craze that was going to make everyone rich, and then they just fell off. Now, obviously, when we come to comic books, though, investing in comic books is something that's been around for at least 40 years of the genre. When you go back into the 70s and people finally saying, hey, look, there's something to these. And then, some years pass and people start taking care of it. They start putting it in bags and boards in the 80s. And sooner or later, there is that market there, and that market is the hobby itself when we talk about speculating and investing. So there's a lot more history than trying to compare directly with Beanie Babies, but I'm just trying to make a point. Anything that we invest in is never guaranteed, even gold and silver and stuff like this. So let's focus more on comic books and talk about uh, how the investing side of it came to what it is today and how that can lead to no guarantees in the future. So going into this, we'll talk about comic books, obviously, for different eras and different reasons of collecting, right? So, for example, when you say comic books are valuable, that's a very broad statement. Well, which comic books are valuable? From what era are comic books valuable? And why? What makes these particular comic books valuable? So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about key books, especially when we go back to the Golden Age and Silver Age. It's pretty much self-explanatory. If you're watching this video, I probably don't need to explain why an Amazing Fantasy 15 is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. I probably don't need to tell you why a Hulk 181 is worth at this point multiple thousands of dollars, especially in high grade. But getting down to the basics of supply and demand and what drives those values, we know the why, right? People want them. They're classic characters that are timeless at this point when we talk about superheroes and the superhero genre. But where the value comes from is basic supply and demand. And basically what has happened is the supply for this product or this book is continuing to shrink while the demand continues to grow. When that happens, what happens to the value? It increases. And that's it in a nutshell, point blank, period, if you want to understand why. So let's take a book like Ultimate Fallout #4 right now. Okay. So now obviously I'm taking a modern book because the modern book doesn't have the like the supply dwindling because, well, you know, when you talk about an Amazing Fantasy 15, a lot of people fold them up in their back pockets when they were collecting back then. Kids read them and wrote on them. They didn't care about keeping them in high quality and whatnot, right? So, you know, the supply went down because of that. They're older, they weren't taken care of, yada yada yada. When you get to a book that's under 10 years old, in, you know, Ultimate Fallout #4, you still have a high print run available. You still have probably most of the books in decently high grades. But what's driving that price up right now? Well, again, when you talk about supply, supply doesn't mean all the books that exist. If I went and bought 100 Ultimate Fallout #4s and I put them in my PC and I said, I'm going to hold on to these and I'm not going to sell them. Those books are no longer part of the supply chain. They're no longer part of the supply. Okay? They are now hoarded by me and they basically don't exist until I decide to either sell them or get rid of them, or something happens to where they're put back into the market and now that supply grows, right? So when you have a book like this that is basically just getting hot because more and more people want it, you have a conundrum happening at the same time, okay? You have a book that people are buying because they want it for their personal collection, for personal reasons. They want it to be theirs. They want to own it. But so when that happens, demand goes up. But once more of those types of people get their hands on it, supply goes down. So what happens? The price still increases. And that's what's happening right now. You're not, you know, it's not just a you know, infinite, you know, never-ending cycle of the only people buying these books are investors that want to flip them right away, right? Because if it was, you know, you'd have people buying them, um, and flipping them right off the bat to where the price isn't going to uphold to the demand and the supply of the market, because it's supply demand like this, to where that supply and demand is going to keep evening out, and the value of that book's never going to get anywhere. So don't get it twisted. Hype on books isn't just because of speculators wanting to buy books and flip them. It's because people really want them to own them, to keep them for themselves, which takes more supply out of the market. So I hope that kind of explains something here. But still, let's go back to the root of the issue that I wanted to address, and that's nothing is guaranteed. So let's talk, and I talk about this all the time. I say, look, right now, Bronze Age books are where it's at. You have Bronze Age books, Bronze Age keys, like even Hulk 181. That's like I'm telling you, that one's getting there to like the Silver Age keys. Make Spider-Man 129. You know, all the hype around the Warlock books from the 70s. You know, the Spider-Woman books, all these books that you can get anywhere from actually like probably $50 to a couple $100. You have a lot of good first appearances. You have a lot of storylines that are getting hyped up because of movie hype whatsoever. And it is a good time to buy these because they're so affordable, yet the values are increasing. Now, I always talk about the fact that most books will, uh, you'll see them start a bell-shaped curve in terms of speculation and demand for that book. And you're looking at the bell-shaped curve of the value, okay? So when you talk about movie hype, I always talk about this. So right now, let's talk about Marvel Spotlight 32, because we had well, or we could talk about Blade, the first appearance of Blade. We could talk about the first appearance of Moon Knight. All Bronze Age books that are kind of peaking a lot due to movie hype or MCU hype, right? So this is happening, and when the movie releases or the show releases, that bell-shaped curve is going to start looking like it's going to dip off. But then it's going to hit a threshold, and it's not going to dip to what it was over here, and you're going to now see a small, steady increase slowly over time. I state this and I stand by this for most of these books on the market. Now, you could take what I just said and say, well, there you go. You just said that these books are guaranteed to increase over time. No, I didn't. I'm basically understanding the rate of return on the market, if the market stays as it is, if the market is continually a healthy market, but what that rate of return doesn't state is the amount of risk that is still there. And that amount of risk is the market can drop at any time. So if tomorrow we wake up and people say, you know what? I don't want to buy comic books anymore. I don't want to buy comic books anymore. And that happened as a collective. Your books, all these books that I'm surrounded with, will be worthless. Worthless. Because that means now you have a bunch of comic books supply and no demand. So what does that do? It inflates the value of the book. Now, of course, we could be logical here and say that, well, the chances of these things happening are, nil or small, close to none. But that doesn't avoid the fact that when we talk about these things, we have to have a certain degree of knowledge on basic economics and basic supply and demand, and understanding how those things work within the comic book industry themselves. Now, I could always compare the stock market or other types of collectibles or other types of things that people invest in, like property. Property is another big thing. Property is a very lucrative investment, right? For two reasons. For why? Because there's always a demand, right? There's always a demand, and that demand usually is higher than the supply, especially with the growing population. So that's why it's always lucrative, for the most part. But even in such a lucrative uh, uh, realm as real estate, it's never guaranteed. I mean, we saw what happened when the economy went into a recession in 2008. I actually, the house that I live in was, right now this house is valued at about 4 times what we paid for it, because we got it as a foreclosure, and it was bank owned and at the lowest point of the recession. So it goes to show you, even property in real estate isn't guaranteed. So coming back to comic books, I want the message here to be that we need to be properly informed, especially if we're going to talk about these things. So I'm going to talk about my platform here as a YouTuber real quick, and before I sum all this up and let you guys go for the day. But when I come out here and do these videos, a lot of it's obviously for fun. It's just showing off comic books, doing hauls, showing what I got in the mail, and it's basic fun. But this is a hobby that people invest in. They invest money, they invest their time. And one thing on my channel is that I'm informative. I don't just show off books, I talk about books. Whether it's the artists, whether it's their values, whether it's what books are hot right now and why you should buy them, or all these different things. And when I talk about these things that are allowing people to listen and learn from, I have a platform and I need to be responsible in my platform. Because, and I know as a collector myself, I watch YouTube videos to learn. So when I look at a video that says books that you should invest in right now, I'm smart enough to know that these are all people's opinions. But I want to believe that what you're giving me is proper information, right? So that's why when we talk about investing in comics as, say, YouTubers, or if we have a platform, and even if we're not YouTubers and we're just somebody in a public forum, and we're in a Facebook group that's a comic book group, and they're asking, hey, should I spend this much money on this book? Before you comment, know what you're talking about. And I'm not sitting here saying I know everything. I'm not saying that you should know everything, but I'm saying that before we talk about a subject, we need to educate ourselves the best that we can. And then when we speak on it, we need to be humble to speak on it from a perspective to where we are not consciously providing false information, or not even just false information, but skewed information that could lead people astray, to, say, make a faulty investment, or investment that they weren't properly informed about. Now, again, I'm going to tell all you guys, don't just listen to a YouTuber. I mean, there's a lot of research that you need to do on your own in order to know should I buy this book? Should I invest in this? Should I invest in that? What is the market doing? What's the market saying right now? How do I understand the market? And how do I allow my knowledge of the market impact the way that I invest or collect a comic book? So that's just my advice. And that's what I want to let you guys know. I want to be knowledgeable before I talk on a subject. And I want all of you to do so too. Because like I said, we may be thinking that we're just talking about silly old comic books. It's you know a hobby for kids, but I mean we have a lot riding on this. This a lot of this we're putting a lot our livelihoods into it. This is our livelihood, so let's be educated in what we're talking about. Let's not just come out here and make cool videos talking about a topic because we think it's going to get a bunch of clicks and a bunch of views and it's going to get our subscribers up. Let's not do that. Let's be informed. You know, if we get subscribers from that as YouTubers, we get followers from it, great. And hopefully we're informing more people of awesome insight and awesome knowledge. So that's my spiel, guys. So again, you know, just looking at investments, guys, don't ever think that anything's guaranteed. There's always a risk in everything that you do. Make sure you educate yourself before making a decision on how or why or where to invest. Look to multiple resources. If it has to do with comic books, sure, listen to us YouTubers. But you know, study the market, study the industry, and know what you're doing. All right, and ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Don't take advice as you know just point blank as fact. Ask questions. Be skeptical. But that's my advice to you guys. I hope that this video was informative. Hope you guys learned something. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you have any kind of concerns or questions or feelings about everything that I talked about. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And until next time.